are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12s. This is Corbin Smith, your host for Locked On Seahawks. Joining me as always, my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. Glad to have you tuning in for our Wednesday episode. Going to be a jam-packed one as always, Matchup Wednesday. Looking at all the matchups to watch when the Seahawks are on offense and when the Seahawks are on defense in Santa Clara, getting ready for their first NFC West matchup of the year against the 49ers. As always, really looking forward to breaking down and dissecting all of those matchups heading towards Sunday's game between bitter rivals. Not for your lead story here on Locked On Seahawks. For over a year since the NFL instituted COVID-19 protocols to combat the pandemic last summer, the Seahawks have been the only team in the NFL prior to today that had never had a player with a positive test. Unfortunately, all streaks are meant to be broken, especially this year. They lost to the Titans up 15. They lost to the Vikings for the first time in the Pete Carroll era, and now they have a player that has tested positive and has been placed on the COVID-19 reserve list. And it's not a slouch. It's a pretty important piece of their offense, Rob. Gerald Everett going to the reserve COVID-19 list earlier today with a positive test. And it's interesting. If this would have been this time last year, then Seattle would not have had Gerald Everett for the next two games because they play the Rams next Thursday. There's a 10-day isolation window that unvaccinated players have to go through before they're allowed to return. And obviously they have to have a negative test coming out of that 10-day window. But now that there's a vaccine, the NFL has adjusted rules a little bit. And so there is at least an outside chance that if Gerald Everett could have two negative tests in a 48-hour window, 24 hours apart at the end of this week, there is still an outside chance they could have him against the 49ers. But for now, his status is uncertain.
Yeah, and I think that the Seahawks have to plan as if they are not going to have Gerald Everett. And before we even, of course, talk about football, obviously, for Gerald Everett and for anybody else who tests positive with COVID-19, we are wishing them, just a full recovery in terms of their life and their safety. But from a Seahawks perspective, from a football perspective, this is a significant blow. There's no doubt about it. I was very bullish on Seattle's potential to be able to go into Santa Clara this weekend and hand the 49ers a loss. But part of that was because I really thought that Seattle's offense would be able to hit on full cylinders. We've of course seen flashes of that throughout the first quarters, the second quarters of all three games, really. And I thought one of the very few bright spots of Seattle's loss to Minnesota was the play of Gerald Everett. I mean, and I use the word bullish specifically because that's the way that he played. You saw the athletic ability. You also saw the intensity, the physicality. He looked very much the same type of player that DK Metcalf can be, that Chris Carson can be. He can be an intimidating force. And given the fact that while San Francisco hasn't been just absolutely overwhelmed by rival tight ends through their first 3 weeks, as we're going to be breaking down a little bit more throughout the matchups, their linebacker play, their safety play, they have struggled a little bit in terms of wrapping up ball carriers. And so that's really one of the matchups that I thought that Seattle might to exploit. Obviously, then Seattle, it's going to be next man up. I do believe that Will Dissly might be able to step up there. Colby Parkinson, some good news, return to the field for the Seahawks in terms of practice. I don't know that he's necessarily going to be ready to hit the ground running, or maybe Jace Sternberger even, recently signed from their practice or on the practice squad. So they do have some talent, but Gerald Everett, as we've talked about over and over in the offseason, Corbin, Gerald Everett is just a different type of a player. So if the Seahawks don't have him in this game or moving forward, that would be a significant loss.
Yeah, if somehow he was unvaccinated, we don't know whether he's vaccinated or not. The Seahawks, according to Pete Carroll a few weeks back, have two players on their team that are not. And so we don't know which two players are the ones that aren't vaccinated. If Gerald Everett happened to be one of those two players, then he's going to be out for 10 days. That's the isolation period. And so, like I said, you would not have him not only for this Sunday, but with the timeline in front of us, he would also miss a matchup against his former team, the Rams, on Thursday Night Football. So that would be a huge loss for the Seahawks. If he's vaccinated, though, as I said, with the new protocols that were put in place before this season, and there were players that were upset about these different changes made because they felt like it was forcing them to get a vaccine, but they're giving competitive advantages to players that are going to do that because it helps safety with your entire team if you get vaccinated. And so there were reasons behind them making that decision. So if he's vaccinated, starting tomorrow, he can get tested. And if he has a negative test twice with 24 hours in between, so by Friday, technically, he could be cleared and taken out of that isolation window as long as he has 2 negative tests and he's asymptomatic. If he's able to do that, then with this being a short road trip for the Seahawks going down to Southern California, then certainly there would be a chance that they could have him available in that game. But like you said, the good news for them, if there's a silver lining here, there is an outside chance that Colby Parkinson maybe could play in this game. Pete Carroll said today that both he and Cedric Ogbuehi, who also returned, was chosen as a player to return to practice coming off of injured reserve. Both those guys could potentially position themselves to play this week. And those are both positions of need because Brandon Shell did not start last week, did not play for the Seahawks against the Vikings, and he missed practice again today, still trying to work his way back from an ankle sprain. So they could have Cedric Ogbuehi starting at right tackle this week against the 49ers. They could also have Colby Parkinson potentially play. I don't know they're going to want to rush him back that quickly into game action, but Pete Carroll made it sound like there was a chance both of them could potentially play their way into actually suiting up and participating this weekend at positions of need. So that would be the silver lining here. The Seahawks did add Jay Sternberger. They also brought in Izzo, or I believe Ryan Izzo is his name, used to play for the New England Patriots and started a number of games. They signed him to their practice squad as well today. So they have some options if Everett is not available for this game on Sunday, but they better hope that he doesn't have to have that entire 10-day window to come back, because that would mean he's out against the Rams, and that would obviously be a really big deal. One other good positive news, one of the good piece of positive news coming from Pete Carroll today on the injury front. He did not practice today because he was finishing clearing his concussion protocol, but rookie Dee Eskridge is expected to practice tomorrow, and Pete Carroll sounded very optimistic that he would be able to play this weekend. So they get another weapon to put into their receiving core. Looked really good in his debut against the Colts before he got whacked and got his concussion late in the game, but they're hoping to have him back in the lineup, which could offset to an extent not having Gerald Everett with his after-the-catch capabilities.
No question about it. I mean, Dee Eskridge being back on this roster, or being back on the on the offense and making big plays, I think makes Seattle's offense that much more dynamic. When you consider the pass rushers that San Francisco has, their issues in cornerback, which we're going to be discussing in a couple of minutes, that it would be a huge help if Seattle has Eskridge back and he is able to make an impact both as a receiver, of course, but also as a runner as well.
When we come back in the second quarter, we are going to get into our matchups when the Seahawks are on offense going up against the 49ers defense. Don't go away. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, Seahawk fans, if you do a lot of driving like I do, then you need to know about a fantastic new app called Get Upside. When you open an account on Get Upside, you can get 25 cents per gallon back every time you fill up at the pump. Over time, that kind of savings starts to add up. Some people are making as much as $200 to $300 per month in cash back with Get Upside, which not only makes it easy to save, but it also gives you multiple cash out options for direct payment to your bank account, PayPal, Amazon gift cards, and more available at any time. And now when you open an account and use our special promo code Touchdown, you can get a bonus 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents back per gallon. So don't pay the full price of the pump anymore. Trust me, it's really nice to have this discount. Download the free Get Upside app. Use our special promo code Touchdown when you sign up for your account and start saving every time your car or truck needs a fill up. That's Get Upside, available in the iTunes App Store and on Google Play. Use the promo code Touchdown. BetOnline is back and better than ever. All eyes are on the gridiron as teams are back to start another football season. And as always, BetOnline is your top spot for all pro and college football action this season. They've got a new updated site with new interface, more odds, props, contests. BetOnline.ag continues to be the top source for everything football. Head to their website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive a 100% welcome bonus. That's double your initial deposit just for signing up. From football, basketball, boxing, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. Use the promo code NFL100. Bet online, your online sportsbook experts. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast. It's Matchup Wednesday, one of our favorite episodes of the week. Really get to dive into all the specific matchups that we are going to be watching unfold at Levi's Stadium this weekend. The Seahawks NFC West opener against the 49ers. They're bitter rivals. San Francisco entering this game at 2-1 in third place in the NFC West. Seattle at 1-2 in last place right now in the division. They're going to look to gain some ground on their rivals. Let's look at matchups when the Seahawks are on offense. The 49ers defense has been solid, but certainly not at the level they played at 2 years ago when they went to the Super Bowl. The pass rush has not been quite as good. With that being said, Rob, I think we have to start, especially with Brandon Shell's status being up in the air for this weekend, the possibility there's going to be a backup tackle in again. The 49ers still have Nick Bosa, who has had a really solid season. The rest of their pass rush is yet to really come to life, but they've also got Eric Armstead, and they have a few other guys that can rush off the edge. That seems to me like that might be the number one matchup for the Seahawks on offense to watch, because as great as Dwayne Brown is, he gave up 2 sacks last week against the Vikings. He's going to have a really tough challenge going against Nick Bosa, who rushes off the right side most of the time. And then whoever's playing left tackle, whether that's Shell, Ogbuehi, Jake Curran, Jamarco Jones, any one of those 4 guys, whoever starts at right tackle is going to have a difficult challenge given the depth that the 49ers have rushing off the edge. And you have got to keep Russell Wilson upright in this game. If the 49ers are able to get that edge rush going, going to be really tough for this offense to get untracked.
Yeah, as you said, Corbin, with with the 49ers having the dynamic pass rusher back here in Nick Bosa, he has 3 of the 49ers' 6 sacks so far this season. And so he has been every bit the dominant player that he was a couple of seasons ago when, as you mentioned, San Francisco went to the Super Bowl. And of course, the fact that this game is played in Santa Clara, the home crowd, we saw how much Seattle struggled with the crowd noise in Minnesota a week ago. And if you are going to have somebody else playing at that right tackle position instead of your normal starter, Brandon Shell, obviously that leaves the Seahawks offensive line that much more vulnerable. So I think that, everybody is going to want to focus in on Dwayne Brown and Nick Bosa, and I'm certainly among them just because you're talking about 2 of the absolute best in the game. But I love that you mentioned Eric Armstead. I think that Javon Kinlaw, both of whom were limited in practice with injuries so far this week, so it remains to be seen if they will be able to play. But both of them are absolute monsters, and they have the ability to kind of take over the middle, not just on the edges as well. So I really think that this is a very formidable defensive line from the 49ers. As you mentioned, they only have 6 sacks, but this is one area which the 49ers, I believe, are better than their statistics indicate. And of course, as you just said, priority number 1 is keeping Russell Wilson upright and feeling safe so he can attack a secondary that I think is one that is vulnerable, especially when you have the receiver talent that the Seahawks have.
And I'm glad that you I'm glad that you gave me the segue there with cornerbacks, because that is going to be our next matchup here. Obviously, the Seahawks, 2 of their best players are Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. So it feels like every week we are outlining matchups featuring the receivers. But this is a 49ers secondary. Richard Sherman, we just saw him sign with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So he's no longer in San Francisco. They lost starter Jason Verrett to a torn ACL in the season opener. They've got another injury with Josh Norman, who they just signed. He's dealing with a chest issue, did not practice on Wednesday. So they are really banged up in a position that they've already had a ton of turnover. And by the way, the Seahawks feasted on this secondary last year, especially the first matchup between these teams. DK Metcalf had one of the biggest games of the season against the secondary, and that was with a healthy Jason Verrett in the lineup. And so this feels like, maybe the Seahawks offensive line going against the edge rush, that's an area the 49ers can exploit. But if the Seahawks can block just good enough off the edge to give Russell Wilson some time to throw, they have to be loving the matchups on the outside, especially if they have Dee Eskridge back. That's another player against the slot corners the 49ers are going to be playing that could have the potential to take the top off of this defense. This is a secondary that is ripe for giving up big plays.
It really is. I mean, that's the thing. And the 49ers have had to kind of go back to the well a little bit, signing the veteran Josh Norman. He has also had injury issues already this early season. They've relied a little bit on one of their day 3 selections, a former Oregon standout, Diomedor Lenore, at the cornerback position. So I'm sure DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, perhaps Dee Eskridge guy just be, frothing at the mouth with anticipation with the fact that the San Francisco 49ers cornerbacks have been every bit as questionable, as sketchy in their play so far as Seattle's cornerbacks have. And with all due respect to the 49ers wideouts, I don't know there's many teams in the NFL who have the firepower that Seattle has, the receiver position, and also has a quarterback as talented as Russell Wilson. So you said it. If Seattle can protect Russell Wilson, this is a secondary that the Seahawks should be able to exploit. And again, with Josh Norman is a good physical player, but at the same time, he's not as big and physical as he used to be. Lenore is more of an athletic guy. He's not a big physical corner. Emmanuel Mosley, another corner for them who's seen some action. And again, another not a real imposing kind of a corner, not like what the 49ers have had in the past. So this could be one of those games where DK Metcalf just turns a beast mode kind of a style of play. It might be able to kind of take over this game. And one other thing about the 49ers secondary, so far, they have allowed 5 touchdowns. They have 1 interception, and that 1 interception was from the linebacker, Dre Greenlaw. So again, this is not just a secondary that is giving up some points. They're not taking away the football either. So again, this should be one that Seattle should be able to move the ball consistently against the San Francisco defense.
And they just got Emmanuel Mosley back from injury himself. He made his debut in week 3, their loss to the Packers, and played fairly well. But he has had a tough time with DK Metcalf in the past. Metcalf feasted on him in that first matchup at Lumen Field last year. I believe that was in week 8. And so Metcalf's got a track record already of success against this football team. And so got to believe that, as you mentioned, frothing at the mouth, I think that's the perfect terminology here. The receivers have to be excited about this matchup against an unproven 49ers secondary that is dealing with injuries right now. And last but not least, we have to mention Fred Warner because he's the best player on the 49ers defense, in my opinion. I know Nick Bosa gets a lot of buzz, and he's a fantastic player, but Fred Warner is one of the top 2 or 3 linebackers in the game today. An incredible talent, the ability to cover, to blitz, an outstanding run defender. He can do it all. And I really like this matchup, him going against Chris Carson. And you really could say Chris Carson and Alex Collins, maybe Travis Homer, going up against the linebackers and the safeties for the 49ers. And the reason I'm including the safeties in this, the 49ers have given up the 7th most receiving yards to running backs in the NFL, and they are 3rd in receptions by running backs. So they let running backs make an impact in the passing game. And I feel like that's something the Seahawks have not done quite as much as I expected at this point, but that might be a big part of the game plan, especially if you don't have Gerald Everett available at tight end. They might try to attack the 49ers some with their running backs in the passing game. And oh, by the way, San Francisco has given up 4.7 yards per carry. They are near the bottom of the league in that area. They have really struggled defending the run this year. So I think Chris Carson and the rest of Seattle's running backs are going to be crucial, not just in the run game, but also getting involved in a passing game, catching some passes from Russell Wilson. And that's going to put some stress on the linebackers and the safeties for the 49ers, given the fact that that has not been an area that they have done well so far this year.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. As I mentioned before, I think that the 49ers pass rush is better than their 6 sacks through 3 games would suggest. And a big part of that is that the opposing quarterbacks are getting the ball to the running backs very quickly and trying to eliminate that pass rush. And, unfortunately, from a 49ers perspective, while Fred Warner is an absolute superstar, I would argue that he's their best player, not only on defense, that he's their best player, period. Again, with a tip of the cap to George Kittle, to Nick Bosa. I'm a big Deebo Samuel fan. I'm a big Trent Williams fan. The 49ers have a lot of talent, but I am a huge fan of Fred Warner. And I just love the TV matchup because obviously they're going to be on the screen a lot. Fred Warner versus Chris Carson just in the hole, just those linebacker meets running back in the hole. Who
The
has the
matchups
greater
you live
power?
for, man.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what you live for. So I think that's an exciting matchup from that regard. But I love that you mentioned, again, just the passing game, whether it be Chris Carson, whether it be Alex Collins, whether it be Travis Homer or DJ Dallas. I really think that Seattle needs to get the ball to their running backs, especially if Gerald Everett is not available. As you mentioned, as good as Fred Warner is, Azeez Al-Shaair, the outside linebacker for the 49ers, Jaquiski Tart, their strong safety, both of them do have some missed tackles already on film so far this season, Corbin. And so I do think that is going to be a matchup that Seattle is going to try to take advantage of. And we talked about Dee Eskridge a moment ago. Again, on those jet sweeps and things like that, he has the type of juice that might be able to make those linebackers and safeties miss, not just the corners. And I think that element of the running game could be critical in this game.
And just using the pre-snap motion, even if they're not handing it off to him on those fly sweeps, can get those linebackers paying attention to him, and that can create bigger creases for Chris Carson too. There's a lot of stuff you can do off that, and really it can put the linebackers in an area of conflict against the passing game too. And that's been something they've missed the 2 games that Dee Eskridge has been out, not just handing it off to him there, but just that threat of him being a dominant runner on those jet sweeps and what it can do for the rest of their offense. So that could be a big part of their run game this week against the 49ers too, getting him back healthy on the field. When we go back in the third quarter, we're going to switch over to when the Seahawks are on defense, going up against a 49ers offense that has put up decent points, and Jimmy Garoppolo is looking pretty solid so far this year. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Looking to step up your workout game? You need to try Built Bar, which has 9 delicious flavors. When you talk to a Built Bar fan like myself, we're definitely passionate about our favorite flavors, whether it's raspberry, mint brownie, my personal favorite, peanut butter brownie, double chocolate, salted caramel. There's something for everyone. If you haven't tried all the flavors, you can get a mixed box where you'll get 2 of all 9 flavors. And most of the flavors have 17 grams of protein, only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, and only 4 grams net carbs. 9 amazing flavors. They're all tasty, and they're all healthy. Tastes like a candy bar. Go to BuiltBar.com and use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your first order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast. It's Matchup Wednesday. I'm your host, Corbin Smith, joined as always by Rob Rang. We just broke down matchups we're going to be watching when the Seahawks are on offense going against a 49ers defense that has plenty of star power. Now switching gears when the 49ers are on offense going up against a maligned Seahawks defense. We've seen the headlines the last couple days, and they've been rightfully earned. This defense has not looked good at all the last 6 quarters. They looked solid the first half against Tennessee, and ever since that point, they've really had a hard time slowing down. Opposing offenses have given up 30 points in each of the last 2 games, over 900 total yards of offense against the Titans and the Vikings. So they're going to be looking to right the ship. And this is a talented 49ers team, but I don't know that they have the overall talent that we have seen the last 2 weeks from the Titans and the Vikings. That being said, we have to start with who I believe is the best tight end in the NFL overall, and that is George Kittle. The Seahawks' number 1 priority, trying to slow down this offense. You have to contain Kittle because he has killed them in the past. And that onus is going to fall on Jordan Brooks and Jamal Adams. I expect to see a lot of number 33 going up against George Kittle. Last year we saw Quandre Diggs on him some as well on some of the deeper patterns. So maybe we'll see that matchup. But I expect to see Jordan Brooks get plenty of chances on him in coverage, and I expect to see plenty of Jamal Adams. They need Jamal Adams to play like a $17.5 million man in this game going up against the NFL's best all-around tight end.
Yeah, that's what's going to be interesting to see how Seattle chooses to match up with George Kittle, because I agree with you. I mean, he is an absolutely phenomenal player. And, it was interesting when Seattle pulled off the big move to acquire Jamal Adams in the first place. George Kittle was one of the players that both Pete Carroll and John Schneider kind of mentioned that they had to be able to, kind of slow down some of these absolutely dynamic weapons in the NFL, and Kittle being a big part of that. So whether it be Adams times one-on-one, whether it be a combination of he and Brooks, Quandre Diggs, or some of the other long physical defensive backs that Seattle has used in the past. Remember, Ryan Neal has had some pretty big moments, covering tight ends as well. I think that there's a lot of different options here for Seattle to consider. But as you said, it is absolutely critical that they slow him down, that they slow George Kittle down. And we're going to kind of go into one of the San Francisco's other dynamic pass receivers. But again, I think it starts with George Kittle. If you can slow him down and force Jimmy Garoppolo to look outside to his wide receivers, that's just going to buy that much more time for Seattle's pass rush to hopefully get home.
And I'm glad you mentioned receivers, because here's the thing. The 49ers, we're not going to sit here and debate that they have a receiving core that is equal to the Titans or the Vikings, because quite frankly, they don't. I don't think that you would put their receiving core up in that upper echelon. With that being said, they have a former first-round pick in Brandon Ayuk that has a ton of upside, can take the top off the defense, has after-the-catch capabilities. And then you want to talk after-the-catch capabilities. He's had some injury issues in his first couple years in the league, but just the way that Deebo Samuel plays the game, he is one of my favorite receivers. He doesn't take crap from anyone. When he has the ball in his hands, he is looking to bowl you over. He is an after-the-catch maestro. He's in the top 10 in the NFL in receiving yards this year. He's really having a breakout third season, and Kyle Shanahan will do whatever he can to get the football into his hands. They'll throw some quick bubble screens to him and let him go to work after the catch. He can win downfield a little bit, tough as nails in the middle of the field on contested catches. You can get him involved in the run game, like we mentioned with Dee Eskridge. That matchup against Trey Flowers, you talked about this on yesterday's show. This might be a matchup that's actually a better one for Trey Flowers because of his skill set. He is better against physical receivers because that is more his playing style. So maybe him going up against Deebo ends up being a decent matchup for the Seahawks. But Samuel is going to be a handful for their cornerbacks. And then DJ Reed on the other side going against Brandon Ayuk. The 49ers don't have the star power that the last two teams they've played do at receiver, but those two guys still have the capabilities to cause a lot of problems, especially if George Kittle gets going and you have to change up your defensive coverages to try to handle him. That opens the door for the other two players I just mentioned to do a lot of damage, in particular Deebo Samuel, who you're going to have to get him to the ground. And if you don't, he is going to be a real problem on Sunday.
Yeah, he absolutely is. Again, I'm happy that we highlighted George Kittle first. Again, we know what a dynamic talent that he is, but Deebo Samuel has been appropriately named. And for those who don't remember him in South Carolina, he was named, it's his nickname, after unfortunately, the late actor who played Deebo in the movie Friday, as far as just being a big, physical, intimidating presence. And Samuel absolutely plays with that type of style. I mean, he's the kind of guy that, as you said, Corbin, he's one of your favorite receivers, one of my favorite receivers. I think that he is the kind of a guy that just about every NFL fan wants to have a receiver who plays with that kind of physicality, intensity on their team. And if you just look at the statistics, you can see how basically one-dimensional, how much the 49ers do lean on Deebo Samuel. I mean, he has almost twice as many receiving yards to this point through 3 games as George Kittle, with 334 receiving yards. That's almost 7 times more than San Francisco's next best wide receiver, the aforementioned Brandon Ayuk, who, as you said, was a first-round pick. He get out of Arizona State. The kid can absolutely fly. He just doesn't always catch the ball. And so definitely Deebo Samuel has the reliable hands. He has the physicality. He's not the elite 4.3, 4.4 kind of speed. He's more in that 4.52, 4.55 kind of a range, but he plays
He'll punch in
fast.
the mouth, though.
Exactly. He plays fast. He's so physical. So again, I do think, as you mentioned, I do think that Trey Flowers is a much better matchup because he is a long, physical type of player. Trey Flowers hits you in the mouth too. Say what you will about his coverage ability, whether or not he has to change the directions to go with some of the really live, smooth changing of direction type of receivers that we see so often in the NFL. I think that he might struggle a little bit if he was going up one-on-one against Ayuk, for example. But besides those two wide receivers, the 49ers have a lot of guys that have some size and physicality. They don't have a lot of straight line speed guys, the way that the Vikings did, the way that the Tennessee Titans did. And so again, I do think that this is a much better matchup for Seattle's secondary. It's so much easier if they can just get a little bit of pass rush and pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo rather than just leaving their cornerbacks on an island and biting your fingernails, hoping that the ball that goes up in the air, it's a Seahawk who comes down with it rather than big Deebo Samuel.
And closing out our matchups here, last but not least, we have to talk about the 49ers ground game. And they have had a number of running backs back there. They lost Raheem Mostert for the season. He underwent knee surgery. They won't have him back this year. They've got a couple rookies, Elijah Mitchell coming out of Louisiana Lafayette, who they drafted in the 6th round. They have Trey Sermon, who they got in the 3rd round out of Ohio State. There's a chance both those guys will be active this weekend against the Seahawks. Two different style running backs, but both very talented, good fits for Kyle Shanahan's offense. And we know that Kyle Shanahan, coming from the Shanahan coaching tree that his father started, that he knows how to dial up a run game. He can scheme it up with the best of them, and he has had success in the past doing that against the Seahawks. And he's known for that zone running attack, and they will attack the edges. I think that is going to be the biggest key in this game for Seattle, stuffing the run. In the middle, obviously, Brian Monet, Al Woods, Poona Ford and company, they're going to have to play well because the 49ers, if they're able to get push, then they will get the inside zone game working, and they'll exploit that. But they want to get that edge rushing game going, and that's going to mean Darrell Taylor, maybe Benson Mayowa, Alton Robinson, whoever's playing that Sam linebacker spot as well as your Leo defensive end spot. You better be able to set the edge and contain, because if you don't do that, Kyle Shanahan is going to scheme all day long to exploit that. And if you can't set the edge against his offense, it's game over because it sets up the play action off of that. Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe not a top 10 quarterback, but he is more than capable of lighting you up with that play action passing game once the run game is working. So to me, being able to set the edge, your Sam linebackers, your Leo defensive ends, setting edge, containing is going to be critical in this matchup. You don't want to let that passing game and play action come off the run game and stuff. Once all that snowballs, it gets really ugly against Kyle Shanahan's offense.
Well, and especially considering just how well that San Francisco's offensive tackles are playing. Trent Williams has been about as impressive as just about any offensive lineman in all of football so far, which is saying something considering all the talent at tackle, as well as the fact that Trent Williams is, he's one of the older players in all of the NFL, sat out almost an entire season in Washington, comes back and is playing at an all-pro level. It's just truly remarkable what he has been able to do. And Mike McGlinchey, former first-round pick out of Notre Dame a couple of years ago, is certainly no slouch in the right tackle position as well. So he got Alex Mack, at the center position. But I think that what you said is absolutely true. It really comes down to Seattle's edge defenders, whether it be the linebackers, whether it be those defensive ends, but they've got to set the edge. They've got to be able to funnel the backs back into where the defense is and not leave cornerbacks one-on-one against one of these running backs. Now, I would say that these running backs, Sermon, Mitchell, and some of the other backs that the San Francisco has on their roster, to me, this is not as gifted as some of the San Francisco running backs that we've seen in years in the past. And I know there's a lot of people who were kind of knocking Alexander Madison of the Minnesota Vikings a week ago. The Seahawks gave up all these yards to a backup running back. Madison is a terrific talent. He is a guy that should be starting in the NFL. He just happens to be behind one of the elite players in all the league. I just don't know that San Francisco has that same type of juice. So if Seattle can bottle up the line of scrimmage, then I do think that they can make San Francisco one-dimensional, force Jimmy Garoppolo to beat you, and that's the recipe for success that Pete Carroll is always looking for. But again, I do think that you are absolutely right. You can't just focus in on the passing game. It's always important to stop the run, but against the Shanahans, it should be priority number one.
Yeah, I really think it's the top priority because everything feeds off of that run game. And I don't view Jimmy Garoppolo as a quarterback that when everything's on his shoulders and the run game's not working, I don't view him as a guy that can elevate the offense. If he was that guy, they wouldn't have drafted Trey Lance, who I'm sure we will see a few snaps of on Sunday as well. So getting that run game contained, especially setting the edge, not letting those backs get one-on-one matchups against corners. That is going to be big in this football game because everything else feeds off of that. So this, maybe last week, stopping the run first and forcing the Vikings to beat you with the pass, maybe that's not the strategy you want to employ given the talent they have. This is a game, though, where I do think you want to get that run game shut down. Let Jimmy Garoppolo be the one that's got to beat you. And I think you've got to like your chances if you're able to do that on defense. You can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to check out Locked On Seahawks on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and the all-new Odyssey app. That's AUDACY. Coming up on our Thursday episode, it's our weekly crossover special. I'll be joined by Brian Peacock and Aaron Crocker of Locked On 49ers, preparing for this upcoming NFC West opener between the Seahawks and 49ers. You won't want to miss it. Always fun with Brian and Eric, one of my favorite crossovers of the year. Thanks for listening in. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Go Hawks.